The alien energy blade streaked toward the throat of the kneeling Avari girl, her glowing blue eyes filled with resignation at the cruel fate decreed by her own people. In that moment, no one dared to challenge the isolation edict on the tumultuous surface of Proxima Centauri b. No one except Lieutenant Mark Richards, a human soldier who plowed through the Avari crowd like an unstoppable force, his plasma rifle aimed at the fanatical Avari High Priestess Kayla and her followers. He halted the execution. Mark had vowed never to let another innocent die, not after his own daughter had been taken by the relentless cosmic terror known as the Ravager. Even if it meant jeopardizing the fragile terraforming efforts crucial to humanity's survival on this new world, he would act. Tension soared as sharp words were exchanged between the humans and Avari, fingers hovering over triggers and blades. Mark's own unit reluctantly trained their rifles on him, ready to take down their former commander to maintain the uneasy alliance with the Avari. But as hesitation gripped them, Mark made his move. Plasma fire blazed as he charged at the executioners, the Avari warriors slicing into his armor and flesh with their energy blades as he wrestled Kayla to the ground. The mingling of alien blood and his own drove Mark beyond pain, beyond reason. Grabbing the limp form of the girl, Zaya, he fled into the wild jungle, a relentless human force crashing through ancient terraforming ruins as Avari warships and human dropships closed in from above. Bloodied but determined, Mark pushed onward with a single hope, a forgotten alien vault known as the Crucible, hidden even from his own people, pulsing with the promise of miracles. As the massive gates of the Crucible clanged shut behind them, sealing off the cries of their pursuers, Mark gently cradled the unconscious Avari girl, who had become humanity's last hope. Inside the eerie silence of the alien structure, Mark's ragged breathing echoed off towering walls as he carried Zaya deeper into the unknown. The angular architecture thrummed with an energy that set his teeth on edge. "What is this place?" Zaya murmured, her blue eyes fluttering open as she stirred in Mark's arms. "I don't know," Mark replied, his gaze sweeping over the strange glyphs etched into the metallic surfaces. "But it's ancient and powerful." As he gently set Zaya down and began tending to her wounds, the girl's slender fingers traced the alien symbols. "The Crucible," she whispered, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "It was built by the ancients, the ones who seeded life across the stars long ago." Mark frowned as he applied a coagulant gel to the gash on Zaya's shoulder. "The ancients? I thought they were just a myth." Zaya shook her head, wincing as she sat up. "No, they were real. They left behind the terraforming technology that shaped worlds like Proxima Centauri b." Her hand touched a glowing glyph, and suddenly, the wall shivered and transformed, revealing a shimmering holographic display. Mark stepped back, rifle at the ready, but Zaya stood transfixed. I can understand it," she breathed, her fingertips dancing over the projected alien text. "It's responding to me, to my mind." "How is that possible?" Mark asked, watching in awe as the Avari girl seemed to communicate with the ancient technology. "My people, the Avari seers, were given abilities to guide the terraforming of our world," Zaya explained, her brow furrowed in concentration. "But there were some, like High Priestess Kayla, who wanted to use that power for their own gain." As Zaya delved deeper into the Crucible systems, a terrible realization struck her. "The terraforming is failing," she gasped, her eyes wide with horror. "Someone has sabotaged the planet's core, the control nexus left by the ancients." She turned to Mark, urgency in her delicate features. "I have to reach the core. I'm the only one who can stabilize the process before it's too late." Mark nodded grimly, checking the charge on his plasma rifle. "Then we'll find a way together." But their brief moment of understanding was shattered by the echo of boots and harsh voices at the Crucible's entrance. Avari Zealots and Earth Defense Force, EDF, troops had breached the gates, led by Mark's former squadmate, Captain Drake. "Surrender the girl, Richards," Drake shouted, his rifle aimed at Mark's chest. "She's manipulating you with her telepathic powers." Mark hesitated, torn between the duty that had defined his life and the inexplicable bond he felt with Zaya. In that moment of indecision, Plasma fire erupted in the chamber as Avari and human forces clashed in a desperate battle for control of the crucible and Zaya's fate. "Run!" Mark yelled, pushing Zaya toward a branching tunnel as he turned to face their pursuers. Pulse rounds whizzed past his head as he returned fire, buying precious seconds for Zaya to escape deeper into the complex. Mark fell back, using the alien architecture for cover, catching glimpses of Zaya's agile form darting through the shadows, guided by the crucible's ancient whispers. Together, they navigated treacherous traps and eerie chambers pulsing with unfathomable energies, always one step ahead of their relentless pursuers. In a vast, vaulted room filled with shimmering holographic stars, Zaya paused before an ancient map of the crucible's labyrinthine depths. "There," she pointed, tracing a glowing line that snaked deep beneath the planet's surface. A transit system leading directly to the core. Mark studied the map, committing the route to memory as the sounds of their pursuers echoed through the cavernous space. "We have to hurry," he urged, taking Zaya's hand as they plunged into the waiting darkness of the transit tunnels. But even as they raced toward the core and the chance to save the failing terraforming, a chilling realization filled the map room in their wake. If the world-shaping process collapsed completely, it would tear open a portal to the dimension of the Ravager, the malevolent entities that once ravaged the galaxy. A fate Mark had sworn to prevent, even at the cost of his own life. Deep within the crucible, Mark and Zaya fought on, the fate of worlds resting on their unlikely alliance. With each obstacle they overcame, each moment of shared danger and desperation, the bond between the battle-hardened soldier and the young seer grew stronger, forged in the fires of their impossible quest. Finally, they emerged into a cavernous chamber filled with the gutted remnants of alien transit pods. "The transit bay," Zaya breathed, her eyes widening with a sudden surge of hope. "One of these could take us directly to the core." But before they could take a single step toward the waiting pods, a hail of plasma fire rained down from the chamber's upper levels. Captain Drake and his squad had caught up, their weapons trained on Mark and Zaya. "It's over, Richards," Drake shouted, his face a mask of unyielding determination. "The girl comes with us. The Admiralty has plans for her." Mark shook his head, stepping in front of Zaya even as Avari zealots poured into the chamber from the opposite side, their eyes alight with fanatical fervor. "I won't let you take her," he growled, leveling his rifle at his former friend. "She's the only one who can fix this, Drake. The only one who can stop the Ravager from returning." In the chaos of the standoff, stray plasma bolts struck the ancient pods, sending them exploding into showers of molten metal and sparks. Mark watched in despair as pod after pod was destroyed, their chance of reaching the core dwindling with each passing second. With fierce determination in his eyes, Mark turned to Zaya, shielding her from the crossfire. "Get to the last pod," he ordered, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll buy you the time you need." Zaya hesitated, tears welling in her sapphire eyes as she clutched Mark's armored hand. "I can't leave you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not after everything." "You have to," Mark insisted, gently pushing her toward the waiting pod. "The whole galaxy is counting on you, kid, on us." He managed a crooked smile, even as plasma fire slammed into the chamber walls around them. "I'll be right behind you. Now go." With a final, anguished look, Zaya nodded and sprinted for the pod, her slender form vanishing into its armored confines as the pod roared to life and began to accelerate down the transit tunnel. Mark turned back to face the oncoming horde of Avari zealots and EDF soldiers. "You want her?" he roared, his plasma rifle blazing as he charged into the fray. "You go through me first." Plasma bolts and pulse rounds filled the air, sizzling past Mark's head as he ducked and weaved, his rifle spitting defiance with every shot. He felt the searing heat of near misses, the bone-jarring impact of glancing blows against his armor, but still, he fought on. A one-man army standing between the galaxy's last hope and those who would snuff it out. Behind him, the transit pod carried Zaya away, speeding toward the core and the chance to save billions of lives. And as Mark Richards made his final stand against impossible odds, he knew that no matter what happened, he had fulfilled his oath. He had protected the innocent, the dreaming child who carried the weight of worlds on her slender shoulders. In the heart of the crucible, beneath the chaos of a failing terraforming process and the looming shadow of the Ravager, a lone soldier fought on. For duty, for redemption, for the slim chance that a young girl's destiny might just save them all. As the hum of the transit pod faded into silence, Mark stood alone, his rifle a hot, smoking weight in his hands. The chamber erupted into chaos as Avari zealots and EDF soldiers converged on his position. "Last chance, Richards," Drake shouted over the din. "Stand down." Mark's only response was a burst of plasma fire that sent Drake diving for cover. He fought with the precision of a man who knew each shot might be his last, every movement economical and deadly. But for each foe he dropped, two more took their place. A plasma bolt seared through his armor, biting deep into his shoulder. Mark staggered, nearly losing his footing on the debris-strewn floor. He retreated, step by step, deeper into the ancient catacombs of the crucible, as the pursuing force split up, hunting him through the maze-like tunnels. Mark's breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled through chambers filled with incomprehensible alien technology, his vision blurred, the wound in his shoulder a constant, burning agony. He rounded a corner and found himself face to face with a squad of Avari. Before he could raise his rifle, a blinding flash lit up the corridor. When his vision cleared, the Avari lay unconscious on the ground. Hooded figures emerged from the shadows, wielding sleek weapons that pulsed with energy. Their leader stepped forward, lowering his hood to reveal reptilian features. "I am Valen," the Sorin said. Mark Richards blinked, trying to steady himself despite the burning pain in his shoulder. The Sorin who had introduced himself as Valen stood tall before him, scales shimmering under the dim light of the alien structure. The air between them was tense, yet the hostility that had filled the chamber moments before had dissipated, replaced by an eerie silence. Mark's grip tightened around his rifle, though he didn't raise it. The Sorins were a race shrouded in mystery, seldom seen even in the chaotic confluence of species scattered across the galaxy. Their sudden appearance here, in the depths of the crucible, was as surprising as it was unsettling. Valen seemed to sense Mark's unease. He gestured for his hooded companions to lower their weapons, their sleek forms moving silently as they obeyed. "We are not your enemies, Richards," Valen said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that carried a strange resonance, like ancient stone grinding against itself. "Then what are you?" Mark shot back, his voice strained from the exertion and pain. "And why help me?" Valen's reptilian eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, met Mark's with a look of calm certainty. "We are the keepers of the old knowledge," he replied, "guardians of what remains of the ancients' legacy. We have watched your people and the Avari come to this world, and we have seen the folly that has led you to this moment." Mark's brow furrowed, his mind racing. "You know about the sabotage? About the core?" Valen nodded slowly. "The damage to the terraforming process is no accident. It was a deliberate act, intended to fracture the delicate balance between worlds. The destruction of this planet's core would do more than just ruin the terraforming. It would tear the fabric of reality, allowing the scourge to return." Mark's heart skipped a beat. The Ravager, the scourge that had destroyed his daughter's world, was closer than he'd feared. "Zaya, the Avari girl. She said she can fix it, but we need to reach the core. And fast." Valen's gaze softened, and he inclined his head slightly. "She carries the gift of the seers, a connection to the ancients' technology, but she cannot do it alone. The core is protected by layers of defenses designed to keep it from being tampered with by those who do not possess the key." Mark's mind raced, but the pain was becoming unbearable. "And you have this key?" Valen nodded again. "We do. But to use it, we must reach the core before your enemies. If they destroy it before we arrive, all will be lost." "Then we don't have time to waste," Mark said, clenching his teeth as he forced himself to stand taller. "But my daughter, she was killed by the Ravager. I can't let that happen again. Not to this world, not to Zaya." A look of understanding passed between them. Valen moved closer, his scaled hand extending toward Mark's wounded shoulder. Mark flinched but didn't pull away as Valen's hand glowed with a soft light, an ancient power flowing into the wound. The pain dulled, replaced by a tingling warmth that spread through Mark's body, revitalizing his strength. "You fight with a fire of loss," Valen said quietly, his voice laced with something almost like sorrow. "I have seen it before, in many species, across countless worlds. It drives you forward, but it can also consume you." Mark breathed deeply, the pain subsiding enough for him to think clearly. "It's all I have left. The Ravager took everything from me." Valen withdrew his hand, his expression unreadable. "Then let that fire guide you, not control you. We will guide you to the core, but the path will be treacherous. Your enemies will not relent, and the crucible itself may challenge your resolve." Mark nodded, his resolve solidifying. "We fight together then. For Zaya, for this world, and for all the worlds the Scourge would destroy." Valen raised a hand, signaling to his companions. In unison, they began moving deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels, their steps swift and silent. Mark followed, his rifle at the ready, his mind sharp despite the remnants of pain. The passageways of the crucible were unlike anything Mark had seen before. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, shifting subtly as if responding to their presence. Strange glyphs glowed faintly on the walls, illuminating the path ahead with an eerie, otherworldly light. The deeper they went, the more Mark felt the weight of the structure pressing down on him, as if the very air was thickening, testing his resolve. "These tunnels," Mark said, breaking the silence, "they're alive, aren't they?" Valen glanced back at him. "In a manner of speaking. The ancients designed their constructs with a form of consciousness, an intelligence that guides and protects. The crucible is one such creation, a sentinel built to guard the heart of the planet." Mark's eyes narrowed as he processed Valen's words. "And what happens if it decides we're not supposed to be here?" Valen's gaze remained steady. "Then it will challenge us. But do not fear. We are not the first to seek the core. The crucible has seen many such trials, and it has granted passage to those who prove worthy." Mark gritted his teeth, scanning the shifting walls as they pressed onward. The faint hum of the crucible grew louder, resonating in Mark's chest, a deep, rhythmic thrum that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. There was an intelligence here, something vast and ancient that watched their every move. Suddenly, the passage opened into a vast chamber, the walls lined with intricate patterns that shimmered in the low light. In the center stood a colossal door, etched with the same glyphs that lined the tunnels. The door pulsed with a faint energy, as if it was alive, waiting. "This is it," Valen said, stopping before the door. "Beyond this gate lies the path to the core." Mark stepped forward, his pulse rifle trained on the door. "How do we open it?" Valen reached into his robes, pulling out a small, intricately carved stone that glowed with an inner light. With the key left by the ancients, he placed the stone into a recess in the door. The glyphs on the stone and the door synchronized, glowing brighter until the entire chamber was bathed in a warm, golden light. The door shuddered, then began to grind open with a deep, resonant groan. As the door slowly revealed the path ahead, Mark's breath caught in his throat. The corridor beyond was a twisting, labyrinthine path that seemed to stretch on forever, its walls shifting and morphing as if alive. The crucible had accepted them, but the real challenge was only just beginning. "Stay close," Valen warned, stepping through the door. "The path will test us, both physically and mentally. But we must reach the core before your enemies do." Mark nodded, following Valen into the corridor, his senses on high alert. The other Sorens moved silently behind him, their presence a comforting reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. As they ventured deeper into the twisting corridors, the air grew colder, the walls tightening around them. Mark felt a pressure building in his chest, the weight of the crucible's gaze intensifying with each step. The very walls seemed to pulse with energy, responding to their movements, testing their resolve. "Mark," Valen called back softly, his voice almost lost in the hum of the crucible. "Stay focused. The crucible will try to break your spirit, to weaken your resolve. But you must stay strong, for Zaya's sake." Mark gritted his teeth, nodding in determination. I won't let anything stop us. But as they pressed forward, the path before them suddenly shifted. The corridor walls twisted and morphed, transforming into an ominous, shadow-filled maze. Mark's pulse quickened as the walls closed in, the shadows whispering in a language he couldn't understand. Valen and his companions halted, their eyes narrowing as they surveyed the shifting path. The crucible is testing us, Valen muttered. It's trying to divide us, to isolate us. Mark felt a shiver run down his spine. We can't let that happen. We have to stick together. But even as he spoke, the shadows began to solidify, forming into dark, menacing figures. They stepped out of the walls, blocking the path ahead, their forms twisting and writhing as they moved. Mark raised his rifle, ready to fire, but Valen held up a hand, stopping him. These are not enemies you can defeat with force, Valen warned. The crucible feeds on fear, on doubt. It will manifest your darkest thoughts, your greatest fears. You must confront them head-on, without succumbing to them. Mark's grip on his rifle tightened, his heart pounding. He had faced countless enemies in his life, but nothing like this. Nothing so deeply rooted in his own mind. The shadowy figures advanced, their forms shifting to reflect the deepest fears of those in the chamber. Mark's breath caught as he saw a figure materialize before him. His daughter, her face pale, her eyes hollow, just as she had been when the Ravager took her. "Dad," she whispered, her voice echoing with pain and sorrow. "You couldn't save me, and now you can't save her." Mark's heart twisted in his chest. He knew this wasn't real, that this was just the Crucible's doing. But the pain was still sharp, still raw. He took a step back, his resolve faltering. Valen's voice cut through the shadows, steady and firm. "Do not let the Crucible break you, Richards. Face your fears, confront your guilt, but do not let it control you." Mark swallowed hard, his eyes locked on the figure of his daughter. I couldn't save you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion, "but I can still save her. I can still save Zaya." With that, he steeled himself, his resolve hardening like iron. He stepped forward, walking through the shadowy figure, refusing to let it control him. As he did, the figure dissolved into mist, the shadows retreating from his path. The others followed suit, confronting their own fears as the Crucible continued its relentless assault. But with each step forward, they grew stronger, their resolve solidifying against the Crucible's tests. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the end of the twisting corridor. The path opened into a vast chamber, the air thick with energy, the walls pulsing with a deep, rhythmic thrum. At the center of the chamber stood a massive, pulsating structure, glowing with an inner light, a core of unimaginable power. "We've made it," Valen said, his voice filled with awe. "The heart of the Crucible, the core of this world." Mark stared at the core, his heart pounding. "And Zaya, can she fix it?" Valen nodded, his gaze intense. "If she can reach it in time. But we must hurry. The Crucible's defenses are not the only threat we face." As if on cue, the chamber trembled, the ground shaking beneath their feet. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the chamber, followed by the unmistakable hum of approaching enemies. Mark's heart sank. The EDF and the Avari zealots had found them. "Get to the core," he ordered, raising his rifle as the chamber's entrances began to glow with incoming fire. "I'll hold them off." Valen and his companions rushed towards the core, their forms illuminated by its pulsing light. Mark stood firm, his pulse rifle trained on the advancing enemies, his resolve unshakable. This was it, the final stand. The fate of Zaya, of this world, of all worlds rested on this moment. As the first of the EDF soldiers and Avari zealots poured into the chamber, Mark's rifle blazed to life. He fought with the precision of a man who knew this could be his last battle, every shot deliberate, every movement purposeful. But no matter how many he took down, more kept coming. Plasma bolts and pulse rounds filled the air, the chamber echoing with the sounds of battle. Mark felt the searing pain of hits glancing off his armor, but he didn't stop, didn't relent. He fought for Zaya, for his daughter, for the chance to make things right. Behind him, Valen and the others reached the core, their hands moving quickly over the ancient controls, trying to stabilize the failing system. But the energy in the chamber was growing unstable, the core's light flickering as the terraforming process continued to unravel. "We need more time," Valen shouted over the chaos. Mark gritted his teeth, reloading his rifle with a fresh clip. "I'll give you all I've got." But even as he said it, Mark knew his time was running out. The enemies kept coming, their numbers overwhelming, and with each passing moment, the core grew more unstable. In the heart of the crucible, Mark Richards made his final stand. He fought with everything he had, his heart burning with the fire of loss, of duty, of redemption. And as the world around him crumbled, as the core's light began to fade, he knew one thing for certain. He would not let the scourge take this world. Not this time. Not ever again.